to another episode of Colorado Politicking. I'm your host, Pat Poblete, and we are focusing on the Gold Dome today because we have reached the legislature's halfway point. In fact, we've gone just beyond it now. And to kind of help us break down where things stand in this legislative session, we have our ladies at the Capitol, Chief Legislative Reporter Marianne Goodland and Legislative Reporter Hannah Metzger. Now, Marianne, I want to start off with you because, like I said, you guys did work on this halfway point story together. But you've kind of got the experience in the building. What do you sense, where do you sense we're at here at this halfway stage?
It's not all that different from where we normally are every year. The first 60 days tend not to be a big deal. You have some bills going through, even some controversial bills going through, but the real meat and potatoes of the session is in the last 60 days. And we're certainly going to see that this year. The biggest bill that came through in the first 60 days was the abortion bill that they debated the other day. But we still have an awful lot of major bills, including the budget, which will take up a full 3 weeks in this building. And that's coming out in about 2 weeks.
Now, Marianne, I want to put a pin in that abortion story. We can come back and talk about that. But like you said, the meat and potatoes is still kind of yet to come. And what the meat and potatoes means is big controversial bills, which means lots of witnesses signed up to testify and plenty of public comment. But that also means meetings start stretching longer and longer throughout the day and into the evening. And both of you guys have recently had your late night adventures at the Capitol. So I want to switch things over to Hannah now. Hannah, you were covering this week a bill that went pretty late into the night on flavored tobacco. Talk to me a little bit about that one.
So yeah, last night was House Bill 1064. It was the first committee hearing after several weeks of buildup and postponement. It lasted until almost 11 o'clock, over 8 hours, during which almost 150 people signed up to testify about the ban.
Now, Hannah, one of the things I'm curious to know about, because our readers can read a little bit more about your story about how the committee meeting went just below us if you're watching on Colorado Politics. But I'm curious to ask you in specific about this, because you also covered a similar ban when you were covering Denver City Council. So I'm curious, how do these two interface? Are there any similarities? Where the differences lie?
Yeah, well, they were very similar to start, and it actually ended up that they had some pretty similar amendments. Last night, we saw that they tried to pass amendments that would exempt pipe tobacco and premium cigars from the ban, and that's something that Denver did as well. And they're also considering an exemption for hookah, and that is something that Denver also did. But the state bill went a lot further, and they actually put forward an amendment last night that would exempt all the restricted stores, which means that flavored products could basically still be sold, just not in stores like convenience stores where teenagers can enter. And that is a huge departure from Denver. And that's something that the bill sponsors were not happy about because they felt it kind of defeated the purpose of the bill. And state studies show that 60% of teens who use these products get them from adults who can buy them legally in these kinds of age-restricted stores.
Well, that's going to be a really interesting one to follow then, Hannah, and I'm sure you'll be on top of it as it continues to work its way through the legislative process. It is in the early stages, as you just heard, just the first committee hearing. But that 8-hour hearing sounds pretty rough, but doesn't really stack up at all compared to that abortion story that Marianne, we were just talking about. How long was that hearing?
Oh, goodness. That hearing went about 14 hours, and that was a week ago. That was a week ago today. Ended at about 3:45 in the morning on Thursday morning. But that pales in comparison to the floor debate that took place the very next day, which started, the debate itself started at 11 o'clock, and the final vote was at 10:15 Saturday morning. I have never, in more than 2 decades in this building, ever seen a debate go that long. And I have talked to lots and lots of folks who have been here even longer than I have. And it's unprecedented for this length of debate. The thing that was interesting about it, though, is that you really saw, at least later on in the evening and into the morning, that really only about 4 to 6 members of the House Republican caucus were the ones waging this debate. And so that was sort of an interesting commentary on just how important this issue was in the chamber. The Democrats were, of course, willing to fight on every point.
That's one of the things I was curious about, Marianne. Like you said, this may well have been a state record for the amount of debate. But let's look at the politics angle of this real quick. Democrats have a pretty overwhelming advantage in the House. Abortion isn't really a topic where Republicans are going to be likely to peel off a number of Democrats, especially when you take into consideration that advantage. What was the point of setting a state record on this? Is it just messaging here?
For Republicans, I think so. The Democrats have maintained that the reason they're doing this bill is because of pending decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court in 2 cases involving anti-abortion laws in Texas and Mississippi. Democrats have been very content to just sit and watch what Republicans have been doing over the last 20 years or so. We haven't had an abortion bill that has reached, or a bill that discusses abortion in any aspect, reached the floor of the House since 2003. And even then it was on parental notification, and that bill passed fairly easily. This is unprecedented because Republicans have tried to get 44 anti-abortion or related measures through the General Assembly, but they've died in committee every single time. So I was intrigued to sort of watch how this debate went forward, given that we really haven't had one like this in almost 20 years.
Now, Marianne, I'll close out with this because we are recording just ahead of the state Senate starting to consider this bill. Are we expecting kind of similar, theatrics probably has a negative connotation, that's not necessarily what I mean, but are we expecting a similar lengthy debate?
In the committee hearing, probably. I was up on the second floor where this debate is going to take place, where this hearing is going to take place later today. And they are preparing for a lengthy night and a lot of witnesses. And that's entirely possible. However, when the bill gets to the Senate floor, and I don't have any doubt whatsoever that this bill will pass through the Senate Judiciary Committee, I don't expect the marathon filibuster that we saw last week in the House. The Senate is just a very different kind of body, and they work together. The two parties work together very differently there.
Well, Marianne, thank you for your coverage. Try and get some sleep tonight. I think I owe both of you a coffee for the late nights that you've had. But until we see you two for that coffee and our audience in person, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again next week.